Hi, everyone. I'm Sue, the support counselor at Amador Valley High School, and I'm here to present about our counseling department, more specifically about support counseling. Typically, during the beginning of the year, I go into all freshman health and global study classes to introduce myself. As you all know, we're on remote learning, so I will be going into some Zoom classes over the next few weeks to present. However, I also wanted to record myself making the presentation just in case I'm not able to pop in to Zoom classes. That way, students and parents will still have access to this presentation. And although this information is targeted to freshman class, a lot of this information is important to all the other classes. So let's begin. So today I'm going to talk about my role as a support counselor. Then I'm going to talk about our counseling department. So we can kind of talk a little bit about the distinction between the assigned counselor that typically shows up in Q under counselor and the difference between my role. And then I'm going to talk about the services we offer and some topics that are commonly talked about when you meet with a counselor. And then lastly, ways on connecting with counselors, especially during remote learning. So I hope everyone had a really good summer. I stayed home mostly. I actually fostered a 2-month-old puppy for a week during the summer, and I told myself never again. No, the puppy was super adorable and was really fun to have him, but it is a lot of hard work. I also baked a lot during the summer while I was sheltering in place. So it's been, it's not ideal to be stuck at home. I would have very much preferred traveling, but also know that I did a lot of cool stuff and I was still being productive. Like I said, I'm Miss Sue and I'm the support counselor. I'm available Mondays to Fridays every day of the week. That wasn't always the case, so I always try to highlight that I am available to students every day of the week. My usual office is located in the counseling office with the rest of the counseling department in the main office. My current office is at home as we are all working from home. My contact information is my email address. It's the best way to get a hold of me now, especially during remote learning. However, like I said, usually if I were to present in the classroom, students are welcome to raise their hand and ask questions. However, with me recording this presentation, if throughout the presentation you have any questions, feel free to send me an email referencing this presentation or if you have any questions in particular. So please feel free to reach out. So I am a part of a team, a fairly large team. We have 6 other counselors that I like to denote as academic counselors, but really they don't just focus on academics. That's their large concern. But we have Ms. Perry, Mr. Helms, Ms. Pacheco, Ms. Bell, Ms. Zarenkat, Ms. Tuhig. As you can see right next to their names, there's a sequence of letters. That is their caseload. So what that means is they work with students with the last names, starting with, for example, Ms. Perry will work with students and their families that has last names that start with A through Z. Also note that we have Mrs. Wharton, who is our student assistance program specialist. She works with me a lot, actually. We collaborate a lot on wellness related activities or events at school. She's also spearheading a peer advocate program for this school year. So you may hear about this great program. You might see her in our communication. There's also Ms. Bays and Ms. Woodworth. Ms. Bays is our college and career specialist. So if you have any questions, particularly about colleges and career and Navions, she is our go-to person. And then Ms. Woodworth, she is also our ROP specialist. So a lot of our ROP courses, she knows a lot of that information. So feel free to reach out to her. But we have a really great team and I'm super happy to be a part of it. So what's the difference? So I keep mentioning academic counselors and support counselors. So my official job title is support counselor. So my primary role is to provide social, emotional, and personal support to any student, regardless of alphabet. So if you notice, next to my name, I don't have like a particular alphabet sequence. So really, I meet with any student that wants to meet with me. So of course, not every 2,700 students at Amador meet with me, but there is a fairly good amount of students that would like to meet with me. Academic counselors, they provide guidance for graduation, college, career, and of course, like I said, although we call them academic counselors, they still very much provide some personal supports to students. But they do have a designated alpha. So they do have a designated alpha that they work with. Whereas for me, I don't have an alphabet that I work with. And if a student wants with the last name that starts with Z or a last name that starts with D, they can very much email me and reach out and share their interest in wanting to get connected to a support counselor. But together, we support the social, emotional, career, college, and academic needs of all students. We work together to connect students with supports and interventions within our system or even outside of our system, right? We feel like a student might need more support. We will maybe introduce them to our district social workers. We might connect them with some outside resources. We also meet with students in small groups based on need, and that goes for academic counselors and support counselors. But as a support counselor, a lot of my small groups tend to be tied into wellness or tend to be tied into more of mental and emotional health needs versus academic counselors. Their small groups tend to be tied more to college information or career information. Here is a counseling welcome video that Mrs. Z made for this school year. You can watch this video on your own. I'm not going to play for it now. I'm not going to play it for you all now. It's always nice to just put a face to a name. We also share what we do for self-care in the video. There's also a really cute cameo from Ms. Z's daughter. So feel free to check that out on your own time. Services we offer. So here are some things that we do as the counseling team. We provide individual counseling. Again, when we say individual counseling, it's not meant to be long-term therapy services. However, if there is a need for a student to receive therapy services, we will work together with a family to refer out, or if they need some help finding a therapist, we can definitely talk about that. But us as counselors, we're just not able to provide long-term individual counseling. Like I mentioned before, we also do some small group counseling. I actually, as a support counselor, I'm going to be starting a coping skills group for freshman students in particular, starting in September. So as a freshman student, if you have interest in participating in my virtual coping skills group, please let me know. Email me. We do some crisis and conflict mediation. This may look very different in remote learning, but when we were in class in person, sometimes there may be some crisis situations and there might be some conflicts that arise. As a support counselor, it's sometimes it's something that I often have to join in or try to alleviate. So it's something that I do, and I actually really enjoy coming into a situation and really helping students work things out. We do classroom presentations, kind of like the one that I'm doing now. We connect you with resources. Like I said, we don't provide long-term therapeutic services, but if it is something that you and your family are interested in, we can refer you to our district social workers. We have a great team that work a lot with our community resources. So they may know organizations, they might know local agencies to provide therapeutic services. We also work with Care Solace, which is a great database. It's linked here in the presentation, but if you ever want to take a look and check it out, feel free to click on it. But Care Solace is an organization that we collaborated with, and it kind of, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It kind of fine-tunes the selection process on their therapy. So oftentimes, one of the things that I hear a lot as a support counselor is that sometimes families don't know where to start. Like, well, where do I go about finding a therapist, or how do I do that? CareSolid has a great organization of data. You go in there, if you click on the link, it asks you, what are we looking for? Is it related to anxiety? Are we looking for long-term therapy? Are we looking for maybe rehabilitatory services? So whatever that we're looking for, there's search It helps refine the search, and I believe you can even refine the search to how far you want the agency to be. You can look within 50 miles. You can look within 25 miles, what happens is after you enter all that search points, it'll then give you a list of possible options. And of course, Care Solace, what they do is they're like a concierge service, so they'll actually even help you contact all these different services to see if are they accepting new clients. And what they'll do is they'll remain in contact with the district social worker and with you to then find an agency that is available and that is looking and accepting new clients, so that way you can then get connected with mental health services. So it's a pretty cool service. So again, this is just one aspect of what we do. We do connect you with resources. And then lastly, we also do wellness focused workshops. So throughout the school year, we'll do it during access time, but with remote learning, we're also planning on doing it maybe during access time or our intervention and support period. And that's on Wednesdays. We do have plans on holding either like live Zoom sessions, or we might even just do a recording and then sharing it and pushing it out to students. So keep in mind, these services are going to look a little different during remote learning, but we're very much wanting to offer the same services that we always offer. So as counselors, a lot of things kind of come up, and oftentimes we see patterns. For example, we have a lot of conversations about transitions and changes with students. And as freshman class, that in itself is a transition, right? Transitioning from middle school to high school. We often have a lot of conversations about relationships and friendships with students, right? So remember those conflict mediations that we often get involved in. Oftentimes our relationships and friendships, we run into hiccups. And it's also something that we talk about with a lot of students. We talk a lot about stress management. As we know, high school can be very stressful. And I think it's really important that students learn a lot about coping skills to kind of help them get through these stressful times. So again, there are a lot of topics that come up, but I like to list an example of some topics that commonly come up so that students have a really good idea of what we generally talk about. Of course, you're not limited to what's on this list. We have a lot of other options and a lot of other topics that may come up. Limits of confidentiality. So one of the unique aspects of talking to a counselor is that what you share with us is confidential, right? And what that means is what you say to us stays in the room. No one else will know about it. We won't tell like your parents. We won't necessarily, we're not going to tell your teachers, right? Of course, there are exceptions to it, right? We can't ever promise 100% confidentiality. So there are instances where confidentiality cannot be maintained due to, usually it's student safety. If student safety is a concern, we do have to let someone else know. We can't, in good conscience, remain confidential about that. So for example, if you tell me someone's hurting you, you tell me you want to hurt yourself, you tell me you want to hurt someone else, right? All that's personal safety, all that is safety of others or other students. We really want to make sure that everyone's safe. In that case, I will have to break confidentiality. But on the other hand, there are times where if you give me permission to share, right? If you're like, hey, Miss Yu, can you share with my teacher how well I'm doing? Or, hey, can you talk to my mom about like what we talked about today? And if you give me permission to do it, I will definitely, be able to share that and with the individual that you give me permission to share it with. And of course, if there's an emergency, right? If there is an emergency, I have to let someone know. So during remote learning, it's a little bit different. We ask students to fill out a Google form consent form. And this is just a consent form that we push out to every single student. If you're meeting with me individually, if you're meeting with any of your other counselors individually, we have to have this consent form signed. And the consent form, again, just reiterates the limits of confidentiality. We're just emphasizing. It's really important that we emphasize the expectations we have for virtual meetings, right? Because sometimes it seems a little bit different, but of course the expectations are still there. So we just want students to be aware of that. And the AV Wellness Center. I don't know if you know this, but being new to our school, I want you all to know about our Wellness Center. It's a fairly new development. The AV Wellness Center has only been our AV Wellness Center for the past 2 years, so it's still fairly new. But the AV Wellness Center is often a really cool space. If you look at the photos on the right, there's just some photos of our wellness center. We got some really cool furniture. It's very calming and quiet in there. And the idea is that it's a safe space and it's a really quiet place for some students to come in for a short break. During the day, if you're feeling like, you know what, I need a mental break, I'm going to come in for 15 minutes and take a rest. That's available. We also hold our wellness workshops in that space. But with remote learning, counselors, of course, had to, we don't have access to our physical wellness center. And students, of course, aren't able to go in to the wellness center physically. So we adapted. We created a virtual wellness center that it's essentially a Google website, and it offers a variety of coping resources. So the same idea, right? If a student comes into a wellness center like, hey, I need a 15-minute break. Today has been stressful. And in that space, you're able to sit on a comfy couch. There are a lot of resources there, right? There might be some coloring books. There might be some yoga mats. There might be some worksheets that really encourage students to kind of self-reflect. So it's a lot of those like coping resources. So we wanted to kind of offer the same thing, but in a virtual medium, right? So in this Google website, there are a lot of great coping resources shared. And we're going to keep adding more resources throughout the year. So stop by for a quick visit. Our AV Wellness Center, there's a tiny URL on the bottom. And I also created a video, which is a tour of our virtual wellness center. It's a short 5-minute video. I go over all the little tabs and resources that we have in our virtual wellness center now. Or you can visit it on your own. So you can either watch the video, or you can always just go into the tinyurl.com/AV Wellness Center to check it out. So how do I meet with a counselor? We've talked about what the difference between support counselor and maybe your assigned academic counselor, but what if I want to meet with them? So with remote learning, it's going to be a lot different, right? Right now, the main way to request a meeting with a counselor is to first email them. Again, with email, it's not for urgent requests, right? If it's urgent requests, an email just wouldn't be appropriate because we can't guarantee that your counselor will respond immediately. I'm sure their email inboxes are really full. But again, if it's not an urgent request, feel free to send them an email. And then when your counselor reads the email, they're going to respond to you with a booking appointment link. So they're going to give you a link. Ideally, it'll be a Google Calendar link. And then you will then go into that link and you're going to book a time that works for the both of you. Or if the counselor just responds back with like, hey, how about next Monday at 2 p.m., right? So your counselor will respond. And then, of course, they're going to share that virtual consent form that I talked about that emphasizes the expectations of virtual meetings. And then, of course, the Zoom link with you. So again, email will be the best way to get a hold of counselors now. Of course, in person, if we were ever to return back to school in person, you'll get to drop in at the counseling office during lunch or brunch, before and after school, and you can kind of say like, hey, I would really like to meet with you. Or you can fill out like you could fill out a paper appointment request form. But again, now with remote learning, email is the best way to get a hold of us. Counselors also each have their own Google Classroom. It's optional, right? So they're not graded, right? For your Google Classrooms, for your teachers, you kind of have to join them because you want to make sure you know all your assignments. You want to make sure you're getting a good grade. But for counselor Google Classrooms, they're optional Google Classrooms. We're going to assign you things, but we're not necessarily going to grade you on it, right? You're not going to get a grade on your transcript for joining our counseling class. But this is a great way for us to share information for students. So that means is also a great way for you to stay up to date with information. So each counselor, including me, your support counselor, also has an optional Google Classroom, and even our college and career specialists, they share a classroom. So again, feel free to find your academic counselors. So for example, if your last name starts with an L, you want one to add into Ms. Pacheco's Google Classroom. And of course, if you want, you can add into my Google Classroom. So for my support counseling Google Classroom, it's gonna look a lot different than the other counselors' Google Classrooms. My Google Classroom's focus again is on wellness. It's on social and emotional health. So you might get a lot of resources about coping skills. You might get videos of me doing a presentation about meditation. You might see me post a link of like an activity that can really boost your mental and emotional health. So again, it'll look a little different. So I would encourage you to just add into our Google Classroom codes. I promise we're not going to spam you with a lot of information, but it is still important to have. I mentioned before, we do wellness workshops. This year, of course, a lot of it's going to have to be virtual, but we have really wonderful plans. We do plan on holding virtual wellness workshops during access period and or intervention and support period. And both those periods are on Wednesday. So on Wednesdays, we'll most likely offer some great workshops. Some of them we're hoping to do live, right, where we send a Zoom link, we invite participants to come in. We might do a live meditation session, maybe. We might even do live yoga. We might invite like a guest yoga instructor, or maybe a counselor will want to lead a yoga session. We might maybe just hop on Zoom and we do a therapeutic art activity together. We can talk about self-care. We can, again, do a coping skills lesson. Again, there's many, many different ideas. So feel free to, again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on, but just ways on how you can stay connected with our counseling department. That way you will know, okay, what's the upcoming wellness workshops? What is it going to be on? What's the topic? Do I want to join? What's the Zoom link, right? So again, just making sure, again, Google Classroom will be a great way to do that. That's where I'm going to be sharing all this information. So also email would be the best way. So keep an eye out. If you see an email from me, don't delete it, read it, right? So, because I might just be advertising upcoming wellness workshops, and maybe you don't have an interest in it now, but again, maybe throughout the year, if you're really feeling up for it, or it's just been a really stressful week, or you're tired of Zoom classes and you really wanted to do like a Zoom yoga session, feel free to pop in. Lastly, how do we stay connected? This is really important, especially during remote learning. Feel free to take a photo or a screenshot of this slide. We are on Remind, so the Remind app. Class of 2024, so freshman class has a specific Remind code. So if you text 6BGE AGC to 81010, you will be added into our freshman class Remind. So oftentimes we'll send a Remind if there's freshman specific activities coming up, or there's information specifically for the freshman class. Feel free to check that out. Newsletter, counseling department sends out a monthly newsletter to your school email. So again, like I said, if you see an email from me, it's most likely a newsletter. Don't delete it, check it out, read it. It includes a lot of important updates from the counseling department. Again, it includes a lot of the wellness workshop information. Google Classroom pages, we talked about that. So again, the codes are in the previous slide. We also are on social media. We are on Instagram and Twitter. I want to say our Instagram's more active than Twitter, but feel free to check that out. Again, we post some encouraging, often uplifting posts or reminders, and we also share important information on our Instagram. We have a wonderful updated website that you can check out. The bit.ly's right there. And then lastly, subscribe to our AV Express. That's a newsletter that parents often subscribe to. And we also push out the same information that we're pushing out to your Google Classroom, the newsletter, website, we also push out to AV Express. So there's many different ways our information is being shared out there. And just to be safe, it's always good to just be subscribed to and be a part of every single one. But of course, you make that decision which ones you think will be helpful. I think the Google Classroom pages can be really, really helpful because I feel like students are used to Google Classroom and how it works. You're in Google Classrooms with your regular assigned teachers. So, just adding one more Google Classroom from your counselor isn't going to be too much. At least I hope not. But again, if you have any information or if you have any question, feel free to email me. My email is right there. And feel free to reach out. And on the right, there's a QR code. It scans to just a bunch of wellness resources. There's a lot of like meditation videos. There might be some LGBTQ material. There's a lot of other resources out there that our Mrs. Wharton compiled. So feel free to check that out. But it's been a pleasure, everyone, doing this presentation. I know it's different hearing a recording of it, but I hope that I was able to convey the message and convey the information effectively. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you, everyone.